Yeah.
What was your takeaway from the A series? Because I think we got a lot of what we were really hoping to see in the way of starting pitching that was not good on that road trip at all. And then you look at what Brian Wu, George Kirby, and Logan Gilbert did, and each one of them gave up one run. Each one.
Huge. Yeah.
It was just a massive series, and I would assume gives a level of confidence that could have been waning a bit after that road trip.
Yeah, and look, this is going back to Logan Gilbert yesterday, going off literally tying his career shortest outings in Philadelphia with 2 innings and just giving it up. You walk away from that outing, and I actually said this on the TV side right after the game. I was like, look, he has in the past, a couple times last year, one time against the Dodgers where he just did not have any answers, everything middle of the plate, and got hit around, came back and was just dominant the next outing. And that's kind of that separator. That's something where, and I'll admit, there was times where I'd go 2 innings and give it up, and then just let it seep into the mindset going into the next start. And it took me 3 or 4 to get out of that funk. With Logan Gilbert, man, he comes out, punches out 13. Are you kidding me? So it was dominant. That was much needed. And we've said this for a couple of months now, that if you want to get to October and say, all right, this team is in a really good position to have a good run at the playoffs, not just get there, because we've seen that. They're going to play a team tonight, the Padres, who are gearing up to have their mindset in the midst of October, not just get to the finish line. And that's how it was in Philadelphia on that rough road trip. But if you're going to get to that place, it's going to be on the starting pitching. And you see George Kirby, bounce back the way he did, Logan Gilbert. But a lot's going to depend on the guy on the mound tonight, Bryce Miller. What are we going to see? I think there's more of a sense of urgency with him coming back from the IL this time. It's not a situation where, hey, look, 3 or 4 and get your feet underneath you. No. You need to get that Bryce Miller running at capacity like right now. And it's going to be a real test for him against this Padres team, which is really good.
Yeah, tell us a little bit. I know you've been looking at your opponent preview there, but how different are the Padres right now, Ryan? Because we were looking at that series was really a breakout series for them on the road, man. They only gave up 3 runs in the 3 games there, but we know they got better, but what have you seen from that team?
Well, first of all, the contrast there with the the Athletics.
How dare you?
Yeah, I'm going to
Nobody
end up
makes
on
that mistake.
By the way, there's a social media account. Give them a shout out. They're awesome. The Last Dive Bar, and they pick up every time someone says Oakland, they pick it up and they post it. It's pretty funny. So, but anyway, that Athletics team, man, you run into that's kind of what happens, right? When you're facing a team and everyone's like, well, it's the Athletics, but guess what? You run into a team that has nothing to lose. Young players some of them are auditioning for 2026. Some young prospect who throws 98 with a 3,000 RPM breaking ball. That's what you run into. But where you can beat them, and this is what the Mariners did, where you can beat them is some of the shortcomings, the bullpen, the depth in the bullpen, the depth on the bench. They just don't have it. Now all of a sudden you're facing the Padres, and they have all that. The bullpen is just locked down. They had a bit of a hiccup their last game, but besides that, their bullpen simply got better. Mason Miller, speaking of the Athletics, is joined that bullpen. They are rock solid. So you just don't have those little weak links. And we saw that with the Philadelphia series. Even though Zach Wheeler went down, you're looking at 3 guys, in Suarez and Luzardo and Sanchez, lefties, 1, 2, 3 in a row that they're going to make a huge impact in October. So that's kind of what you're going to face. You just don't have those weak links like you do with the Athletics. Even though there is that kid at the top of the lineup, Kurtz, who could beat you, and they shut him down. Langoliers, who could beat you, or Jacob Wilson, who can beat you. Yeah, that's great, but they don't have the lineup depth or the bullpen. This is a completely different animal that they're dealing with the Padres.
Hey, just back to the Mariners rotation for a moment. You brought up Miller, and he gave us 5 and 4. The last start. Hopefully he can improve upon that. I still give him a little bit of grace because he's coming back, and you figure, all right, he hasn't found his rhythm yet. But the one guy that I pointed to and said, okay, he needs to step up is Luis Castillo, who pitches the second game of the series, because it has been. He was lights out in July. He had an ERA of 2.05 in the month of July. Mm-hmm. In 4 starts in August, he's got an ERA of 6.05. He hasn't gotten out of the 4th inning in 2 of them. He went 4 innings in 2 back-to-back starts, and then 4 in the 3rd in the other. And then he had 1 great start against Tampa Bay, and then the 3 duds he's got to be better. I mean, this is the guy who's making the most money. He's got the most experience. He's the Rock. He's got to be there. You got 31 games left. You can't have him be who he's been in August. I
agree. And back to my point I made about Logan Gilbert. Rough one. What does he do? Bounce right back. Velocity's through the roof. His split has that depth. He's got that recoil when he throws that pitch, and he's just got that presence about him, punches out 13. Yes, it's a different lineup, but it really doesn't matter. The stuff he had physically and obviously mentally wouldn't matter who he was facing. He could face anyone, an all-star team if he wanted to. With Luis, it was concerning because he had that outing in against the Mets, and the velocity, he was getting a couple 96s, but everything was ending up in the middle of the plate, and it was kind of like you're watching that outing going, is he tipping something? Because they're on that heater like crazy. And then you start to see the velocity dip a little bit. Then he goes into his last outing that we just saw, and that velocity was kind of stagnant. We're seeing 93s, 94s, couple 95s, so it's a little down. His demeanor, and I am comparing to Logan, his demeanor on the mound was not the typical Luis Castillo smirking with that tempo and that cadence where it's like I'm in control. Very similar to what Felix had when he was pitching here, when he was at his peak. He had that certain cadence about him that pitch clock is irrelevant because he's setting that tone. And I just didn't see that last outing from Luis Castillo. So I'm with you on that. There is that more sense of urgency you're going to see. And we saw this from Dan Wilson a little bit more where, Matt Brash took him out of the game, went to Gabe Spire, who's been so good. Latest guest on the Top Step, by the way. Great interview. But there's that sense of urgency that Dan Wilson's starting to show now. He's starting to see that. The leash is much shorter, and the bullpen's going to be way more matched up. Once they get to that 6th, 7th, and 8th. So it'll be interesting. If Luis, I think he's going to be maybe on a short leash. However, you kind of want him to push through some of those thresholds because you said it, man. You need him in this last stretch, especially in the month of September. You need him to feel good once he gets to pitch number 70 and he's got 2 runners on and everything that makes him Luis Castillo, you want that back. Not to mention, once you get, I talk about this all the time. You don't want to just go, yay, we're in the playoffs. Awesome. Now what? No. You want to get to the playoffs and be like, okay, we are so structured and we're so built to make a run here. We know exactly how we're going to match up. We know exactly how long of a leash we're going to give these starting pitchers. We know exactly how we're going to match up if we have to pinch hit someone. And we know how to beat these teams down in those tournament-style games as opposed to, whoop-de-doo, we're a playoff team again. You don't want that. You want to go deep in it. And so Luis Castillo is a big part of that too.
Hey, Ryan, we saw like a glimpse of Victor Robles and what makes him such a great player. And, how likely do you think that the Major League Baseball is going to reduce that suspension and then just, what you saw from him? And he's such an exciting player.
Oh, yeah. It was so fun watching him. And the one question I had was, because Dave, you can speak to this. You have some sort of joint injury, and I know it's been months, down the track, but you have a little bit of that, underlying subconscious. I don't want to dive for a ball and land on my shoulder. I don't want to run into a wall. I don't want to grab that base like he did late in the game when the first game back. He didn't have any of that. I'm like, man, he's just running through a wall straight out of the gates. And, that's one of the reasons, too, why Dan Wilson had him hitting down the lineup. And he's still, I haven't even checked the lineup today, but it'll get to a point where he can show that he can run through a wall, be totally comfortable, get back to full speed, and you'll probably see him at the top of that lineup again. But, man, it was really cool to see him back and just that spark plug because, again, this team, and going into yesterday, they went 8 straight games with runners in scoring position hit, I think like a 160 mark. However, they had like the second least amount of opportunities to drive guys in. And the reason for that is because, they were surviving on the home run. They've got to do a little bit on the margins, right? That's swiping that extra base, putting that pitcher on the ropes, making them uncomfortable. When they can do that to go along with the home run ball, they are going to be the best lineup in baseball. They just had a stretch where it was, sweet, we hit some dingers, awesome, and there was nothing else besides that. There was no traffic and no breaking a sweat from some of these pitchers. Victor Robles gives you that the minute he gets on those bases.
What was your feeling when we learned, and I don't know that it was a surprise to you or anybody, that the Mariners DFA'd Dylan Moore, who was the longest tenured Mariner on this roster, and then they give him his unconditional release, so he's out there to be had by any other team. It's, look, we talked a lot about it. Epic struggles, 3 hits in the last 3 months. So there you go. But he is a guy that did have big moments for this team and came through in a lot of big moments, but ultimately this is how it ends. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, again, man, think of how it started, right? He came in, if you remember, came into camp as, a minor league invitee and had no big league time at that point. And he carried himself in such a way to say, hey, look, I can play. He came into camp saying, I can play multiple positions. And this is when the Mariners were kind of on that fringe of valuing that versatility, because it's so massive to play multiple positions. They didn't really have that outside of Dylan Moore. And then he showed his ability to get lefties, and he Gold Glove defense and all those things. So he carved himself out a nice little niche, but it just hit the expiration date, I think, because obviously he had massive struggles. But they gave Dylan, because of the kind of first class human being he is and how athletic he is and everything else, they gave him a lot of leeway. A lot of other teams, man, if you are not showing that value and versatility, dude, you go one of those months and they have to make moves. Sorry, man, you're the odd man out. That wasn't the case with Dylan. They gave him every chance, and it was frustrating. It was frustrating. You could tell it was written all over his face in between pitches, how the big struggles he was going through and everything else. Now, moving forward, at the end of that game, I know the game was a blowout, and one of the questions was, look, if you got like a J.P. Crawford, defensively, you have to, who's going to play shortstop? Well, Cole Young got a couple of reps where he had a chance to play shortstop, and he did it well. I know it was only a couple innings, but that's kind of like, that's one of these things that you recognize. You give him a couple reps out there and go, okay, check the box. I think we're okay. But wish Dylan all the best. Hopefully he can figure out the in-between pitches, the mental grind that goes on in between pitches, and get it when he gets the pitches.
Hey, Ryan, so now with Cal, with the new record as far as a catcher goes, it seems like all the conversations are popping back up about, can he win the MVP from Judge? And, it looks like it's going to be Judge, Ohtani, Cal Raleigh, possibly Schwarber. But, I mean, as far as the average goes, and they were talking about that this morning, about how much that counts, and it kind of gets, sort of pushed to the back just because, average is not that sexy of a number, but 324 for him. I mean, what do you think now about, do you think that he can actually make a push? Because it kind of got pushed to the back burner there for a while. And, I know it was a conversation piece around the All-Star game. Well,
I think that, and you make a great point, too, about some of the, the older numbers when you're talking about RBIs, average. I'll throw slugging in there even. When you look at okay, he's in a top 3 in every offensive category, whether it's a average number like one of the typical generic numbers, or if it's the underlying numbers, he's a top 3, including National League players. So American League is a top 2 in most of them. Like we're talking OPS, a lot of those numbers as well, right? It's interesting because, man, it's going to make for some. It's going to, maybe break the narrative to say, all right, an MVP, the value there is what he does in regards to on the pitching side. So I think his biggest argument against Aaron Judge, and let's say Aaron Judge puts up a typical Aaron Judge month, right? Let's say he's at 80% capacity. It's going to be very hard to sort of break that typical narrative to say, all right, he is more worthy of Aaron Judge because of all those offensive numbers outside of the home runs. Aaron Judge has him beat. However, I think there's enough of a conversation now nationally and enough of a push and a sway to say that you have got a catcher who is taking on a completely different workload and a completely different responsibility in regards to value, taking on a pitching staff and taking on everything he does behind the dish and the percentage of games he is behind the plate. That has to be taken into account. And I think that conversation's been going on since early on in the season when he was at the top of the home run list to have enough of a sway, in my opinion. Now, if it didn't, if it didn't have enough of sway, or for example, if this Mariners the Mariners pitching was just walking everyone and it wasn't great, and he had less of a percentage behind the plate, that's different. But the fact that, and again, going back to what we initially talked about, let's say this team has a great run in September, and they get through, and the starting rotation has the kind of the consistent turns that we are seeing to get him to October. You cannot go past the fact that Cal has the value put forth to get the team to the playoffs. Therefore, it's going to help. And by the way, look, if the Yankees, they've been struggling. They have been struggling. Aaron Judge is an amazing player, one of the arguably the best player on the planet, and Ohtani and obviously Cal's in that conversation. If the Yankees slip out of the playoffs too, I think that's going to help Cal Raleigh. But yeah, I think, like I said, guys, there's enough conversation around the fact that what he does in the position he plays now that would break that narrative to take it away from Aaron Judge.